Where'd my camera go? That's weird. Oh, there I am.
I
Okay.
see
Now
you.
that, yeah, okay. So for a minute, all I saw was the icon. That was very strange. Um, all right, we are live just like that. My name is Tim Patterson, and I am with Trade Show Guy Exhibits. It's my company here in Salem, Oregon, and I've been blogging and doing stuff online for several years as Trade Show Guy. So thanks for joining us today for the Trade Show Guy Exhibits webinar. We are discussing VR or virtual reality. Becoming very popular, especially among my kids. They all want it. I'm not sure exactly what it is yet, but they seem to know a lot about it. In fact, over the weekend, they were talking about, let's create a virtual reality room so we can walk around and stuff. And I'm going, okay, you're going to bump into stuff, right? Haven't figured that out yet. So anyway, thought we'd bring in an expert. Dave Beck, Foundry 45. I tracked him down a month or two ago, and we've communicated a handful of times. I thought, well, I'll bring Dave in because he had some great information. I had a client inquire about using it as a trade show booth, and I thought, well, that's kind of cool. So, Dave, hello.
Hey, Tim, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Foundry 45, you guys are in Atlanta. Give me like the thumbnail sketch of what it is you do and a little bit about the company.
Sure. Again, hey, I'm Dave Beck. I'm with Foundry 45. We're the business VR leaders. And one of the main areas we focus on is actually face-to-face events like trade shows, conferences, brand activations, and whatnot. So I think this should be a really good conversation today.
Well, it'll be fun to hear all about this, and we have a kind of a list of things we're going to talk about. So, I started hearing about virtual reality, and I remember reading about the Oculus Rift here probably a year, maybe 2 years ago, about this, teenager virtually that invented this thing, sold it to, I don't know if it was Google or Facebook or somebody for like hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. Maybe it was $1 billion. I don't know. Money got thrown around, and
Palmer
that's really
Luckey
all I
sold
know.
it to Facebook for $2
Was
billion. dollars.
Facebook for $2 billion. So okay. This kid stuff, right? But obviously there's a lot of money in it. People are going for it. It's a big deal. What really is it?
Okay, yeah. So I actually printed out the Wikipedia definition of virtual reality. It says computer-generated simulation that can be interacted with in a seemingly real way. So what does that mean? Basically, it's a totally immersive experience where by putting on a virtual reality headset, you can appear to be in a completely different environment than the one that you're currently in. And so what can that do? Well, it can transport somebody across the room, across the country, or anywhere around the world. And we'll spend a lot more time talking about specific examples of that. But I wanted to give everyone just kind of a real quick primer on the different options for virtual reality headsets, because that's kind of important for kind of just having a baseline here in general of what we're doing. So there's two main types of virtual reality kind of headsets. One is the mobile-based headsets, and the other one are PC-based headsets. We focus mainly on mobile-based headsets because they're really easy to actually implement in a trade show environment. So for your type of events, it's a great way to go. And there's two different types of mobile headsets for VR that both work the same way. Essentially, they combine a pair of goggles with a smartphone. And the smartphone is actually the processor and the screen that you're looking at. So I have a couple of examples here. We'll see how well they actually show up on the webcam.
Let's take a look.
So the first one here, this is a Samsung Gear VR. And it's a partnership between Samsung and Oculus, which, as we said a second ago, was actually bought by Facebook a couple of years ago. And the way it works is there's a few very specific, there's 4 or 5 Samsung phones that actually, again, serve as the processor for the experience and also the screen. This phone goes in this headset. So you actually put them together, push it in there, and then when you put it on, you actually watch the experience on it like that.
Very cool.
Pretty cool, eh?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the high-end mobile VR opportunity. There's also something that's really cool called Google Cardboard. And this was actually designed, you've heard of kind of the Google time thing where Google engineers have 20% of their time to just do kind of crazy moonshot fun stuff. This was designed by a Google engineer that said, hey, this is a great idea, but it only works for a couple of specific phones. What about me and my iPhone or my just general regular Android? how am I supposed to do it? So he came up with an idea of actually using what's called Google Cardboard. And it literally, if you can look closer here, it actually is cardboard. It's made out of cardboard. It's got some little bitty lenses in it. And when you open it up, you run an app on your phone, and you put your phone in here, like, just try to make sure you can see this. Put your phone in like that and put the top on, and then you can watch the experience in there like this. This is one we did for an Adult Swim show. It's a little meatwad Google Cardboard. They can be branded. They're a great thing to give away, actually, at shows. This is one we did for ICSC, which is a big shopping center consortium. And they're relatively inexpensive, and you can give them away. And you can have apps on your phone that they can download from iTunes or Google Play. So it's a pretty interesting opportunity.
I'm just curious, when you talk about putting a phone into a system or a viewer, how does that differ from what Oculus Rift is? I understand that's a standalone sort of thing. Is that where you plug it into a computer or something like that? So that's a different kind of headset?
Yep. So that's the next one up, right? So we just talked about the mobile options. There's also what's called PC-based. And that's, if you've heard of the two big ones are Oculus Rift and HTC Vive. These are what's called room scale virtual reality, and that's more what your kid was talking about when they said they wanted to be able to strap on the headset and walk all around and do stuff. They're amazing experiences. They're also really good for trade shows. They're just a little bit more complicated to actually implement, and the associated cost with doing that goes up a great deal as well. But there's all sorts of really good examples for what you can do there too. The key is that in order to run them, you have to have a really powerful gaming computer. And it's right now, the way the technology works is there's a tether between the headset for that. It has a big cord coming off of it that has to go to a powerful computer. And so there's a little bit of it's a little harder to implement in space, but it's a cooler kind of actual experience. It's more interactive.
So it's kind of more of a high-end but more immersive experience. It just got more bells and whistles as to what's going on inside the viewer versus the ones that you just talked about, the Samsung and the Google, the Cardboard.
Yeah, so because it's room scale, it means you can actually walk around in the space, and you can walk around in the 3D experience that you're seeing. And then they also typically have handheld wands, essentially, that you can do things in space with that. You can pick things up, or one of the really cool ones has it. You can actually do a bow and arrow. It's amazing. Probably the most popular one right now is called Tilt Brush, and it actually allows you to paint in 3D, and you can walk all around it and get in the middle of it. It's pretty amazing.
That'd be definitely fun to find out more about. So when you talk about virtual reality in a trade show, there's got to be content that goes along with that. And I presume the content, you probably have a couple of choices. And I would think the most important thing is to have content that relates to what you're doing in the show. Otherwise, it's just kind of a show and tell thing that doesn't really draw people in for the reason that you're there. So walk me through how that works with the people that do this at trade shows.
So I guess there's kind of strategically, I guess there's, what are you doing at the trade show, right? And there's kind of two typical ways that it's actually used. At the most basic level, you're going to just get people excited and draw a crowd to your booth, right? People love it. It's interesting to see other people using it, because when somebody has that headset on and they're all moving around, and everyone's, oh, what are they seeing? What's in there? I want to see that too. And so that's an awesome way to get people excited. But yeah, that's kind of the baseline. One of the main reasons why people really are excited about using it is because at another level is that it's a great way to get people to actually listen to your message, right? So if they're immersed in what you're going to say and what you're saying, you create an immersive story. And yeah, there's all sorts of different content you can do with that. You can do 360-degree videos, 360-degree stills, motion graphics, complete rendered environments, or any combination. When somebody watches your brand story in that and they take the headset off, they spend the first 5 seconds going, oh my gosh, that was so cool. It was like I was actually there. But then they spend the next 5 minutes talking to the salesperson there about what they actually saw and the feature benefits that were highlighted, or the value proposition that was pointed out. And if you compare and contrast that to let's say a 2D video that's playing on the wall behind you over top of the swag bowl, or a piece of collateral that someone hands out. The virtual experience is much more immersive, so people are so much more likely to actually hear what it is that you have to say.
And I would guess that there are so many different ways to approach content. We talked earlier, and some of the content is very specific and custom. There are other types of content which are really kind of off the shelf that you just kind of brand with logos. So tell me the difference on how that works and why someone would choose one or the other.
Okay, yeah. So we kind of do different. A lot of it just depends on what someone's budget is. At a lower level, you can create a custom experience that actually has someone's brand on it, but essentially use the equivalent of stock footage out there, right? So you can use the footage of swimming underwater in scuba or flying over a glacier in Alaska and use that to tell the story that the person wants to get across. But essentially, we're taking the logo, we're putting their logo in there, we're doing a custom voiceover so that the message they want to get across is out there. But instead of us physically going to a site and creating new content for them, we're using existing content. So that's kind of the easiest, simplest and lowest cost experience. A level up from there is if we work with a partner to say, okay, you have, your goal is that you're going to this show, you have 3 main points that are your features, benefits that you want to get across to the constituents there, and essentially we create a custom story around that. And it might be 2 minutes long, where it starts out talking about the brand and then at corporate headquarters, and then the user is transported to their factory in Shanghai and learns a little bit more about that. And then they see the products in use actually out in the field, in a wind farm on the Texas-Mexico border, wherever they need to go. And it's a story that kind of gets the whole point across. And then for that, we're creating new content. All that content is filmed at the headquarters. It's filmed at the factory. It's filmed on site. So that's another level higher of experience. And it is a little bit more powerful because it's actually specific to that customer. And then kind of the highest level one is what we like to call choose your own adventure. So we're still going out and creating custom content for our partners, but instead of kind of telling a linear story where it goes from the headquarters to the factory to in the field, instead we set it up so that the user gets to kind of choose their own path. So they have a decision tree at the start that says, hey, this is our exciting VR experience. And then they can go in and look around. And if it's a products company, we can highlight 3 products in the factory by putting a glowing outline around them. And if the user looks at it, they can be taken directly to that piece of equipment and shown. We could use a 2D video that's existing content someone has and put it in there to tell a quick story about that. We could put pop-ups around it that talk about the various features and benefits. Or we could actually take them, when they look at it, we could take them to the factory where that piece of equipment was in fact being built, or we could take them to the field where it's in use. Options are limitless. And then when that brief experience is over, you get popped back to that main scene, and the voiceover says, hey, now that you've seen A, check out B and C, or look at the door behind you and exit the experience.
So, I'm guessing that when you're filming on site somewhere, you've got to film with some sort of special gear, maybe several cameras all at once. I'm not sure how that is. I don't need the full-blown description of that, but certainly there's some sort of, you can't just go out with an iPhone or with even a 35 millimeter DSL and shoot that. You've got to have the equipment, and that's where the specialty comes in, I'm guessing.
Yeah, there's all sorts of different options for filming these days, but one of the most popular ones is actually a ball of cameras. It's maybe the size, large softball kind of size, and they're all packed in all sorts of different directions. We like the one that has 7 cameras in it, all in different directions. And basically, you go out and you film in 360 degrees, and it's getting everything. So it's an interesting kind of production process in that you can't rig it up and have lighting everywhere behind the scenes, because everything's in scene. The post-production is actually more complicated oftentimes than the production, because once you've taken that footage, you have to go out and take the data from each one of those cameras and stitch it all together so that it's all one big scene. And that can be You have to try and make sure you can get rid of all of the stitch lines and make the coloring correct and do shade. There's all sorts of sweetening to be done on the back end. And so yeah, that's kind of where some of the expertise comes in.
So I'm guessing that a lot of the cost of this is just the labor of these really highly skilled people that know how to do all this, and you need time. So let's say someone came to you and said, "Hey, this is a really cool idea. I got a couple of questions. How long is this going to take? It's going to cost a lot. So how do I justify the expense of doing this? What can you tell me that actually shows there's a good ROI on this?"
Yeah, I mean that's a great question because that's what everybody wants to know, right? Why should I do this? And there's several good reasons for why someone wants to do a VR experience. One of the main things is that they want to generate excitement about what they're doing. They want more booth visits, and the level above that is that if you get more people actually watching your experience and immersed in your message, then what that actually ends up doing is it results in more higher quality leads. And we get that feedback from people constantly. We've also seen data, we've collected data that shows people were able to increase the trade show booth visits by 30% year over year just by using a VR experience as opposed to not. There are a couple other pretty interesting ways for people to actually realize the ROI too. One specific one is that we work with a lot of products companies that have heavy pieces of equipment, right? So think large pumps or compressors or 5,000-pound pieces of equipment where they're typically having to pay to ship that in, set it up, and get a large booth space in order to accommodate all of it. And so then you've got this artificial environment where this compressor is sitting in the middle of a trade show room in Las Vegas, and wow, instead of doing that and paying the expense of that, actually using VR to set up a couple of stools with VR headsets in a 10 by 10 booth, as opposed to having to pay for a 50 by 50 booth and not ship in all that stuff, you can potentially get a bigger bang for your buck by showing this is what that stuff looks like in its actual environment. And here are the value propositions we can put pop-ups in there or motion graphics in the experience that really highlight and tell the story about that way better than you can just looking at a physical piece of equipment right there. The one thing you're really missing out on for that one is that sometimes people like to physically touch it. So, that's just one of the things that to think about.
Yeah, I think when marketing teams look at this, they're just going to have to kind of judge which direction makes more sense, because obviously there's an investment in the VR and getting all that content, but maybe that does mean they're not spending as much on the booth itself and shipping heavy stuff there. It just depends on what their actual product is and how that works. And actually I've had someone approach me that's a farmer, and he wants to kind of show how the farm is, how they do their work on the farm, so they can show off how the products are made. And that's kind of one of the ideas that they had, and they're still exploring that. But that would be one way to show that at a small 10 by 10 booth. You actually can take people out on the farm and fly them in a drone or something. I don't know how that works. Yeah, it'd be kind of fun. So without getting into, nailing you down to any figures, what's the cost range for something like this when people say, I'm interested, but there's got to be a cost to it? Where does that start? I'm just curious.
So yeah, the cost question is always an interesting one, right? People say, what does it cost to build a 3,000 square foot house? Well, what kind of fit and finish do you actually want? But to give you just kind of some general ranges, earlier in the conversation, I mentioned the fact that we kind of focus on 3 different areas. One is a branded experience. It's kind of using more stock footage. And that's the simplest one that we typically do. And those are usually somewhere in the 7,500 to 12,500 kind of range, just depending on the length and the amount of content and how much customization. And those are pretty much the simplest ones. The next step up from that is kind of that custom VR linear story. And usually those are somewhere in the 15 to 25 range, typically 15,000 to 25,000, depending on things like how much we're shooting, where we're like the travel. Obviously if we're in Atlanta, so if we're traveling across the city here, that's one thing. If we're traveling to Timbuktu, that's another. And then the choose your own adventure ones. And I guess in general, you can pretty much do anything you want with VR. It's great. You can customize it as much as you want. So it kind of goes up from there. Those are typically in the $40,000 to $100,000 range. Really just kind of depending on, we work with big brands like AT&T and Wells Fargo and Carnival. We also work with a lot of groups that are industrial products companies that aren't necessarily Fortune 50 companies that people have heard of. And you know what? They have important needs too. And if they can use VR to actually make their product sexier, hey, that's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, and when you compare that cost to the cost of doing trade show marketing, you got a new booth. If you're doing a 20 by 20, 30 by 30, I mean, you have six-figure investments in that. And then depending on the show you go to, you're spending, a lot of money just for the space for the 3 or 4 days. And so there's a pretty
people to be there, and
and there's a pretty deep sunk cost there, and so it's all part of the mix. It's interesting to hear all that. So, Dave, that's pretty much all that I had. I mean, we talked about how to use VR on a trade show booth, lead generation tool, what kind of content to have, potential costs, what virtual reality is, and that sort of fun thing. So, anything you want to add? Let's let people know how to find you first of all.
Oh, yes, definitely. Please check us out at foundry45.com. We're also on social media. Our handle is at foundry45. We have a lot of information on the blog on our website. There's actually a trade show best practices post there that is pretty interesting, I think, for the purposes of the audience here. Again, foundry45.com, just click on blog at the top right, and there's a trade show best practices one that's got some pretty interesting content. And we love partnering with groups that are actually doing trade shows, and we partner with agencies and production houses that work, people like Trade Show Guy that work with folks to actually deliver stuff. So if we can help, please reach out to us.
Dave, it sounds like a fun job you have. Very creative. So
it's not bad.
Yeah. Well, cool. I appreciate your time. And we'll talk again sometime. It's great to hear more and learn more about it and share this on the blog. So we'll let you know when this is up.
All right. Thanks a lot, Tim. Had a great time. Cheers.
Thank you.